So yeah, so welcome then everyone who's listening in. So we're just going to have another weekly kind of conversation, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Jane Roweth, who's one of our associates, who's a health coach and one of our associates, and has a passion for working with groups, and it's something I'm really passionate about as well. So I'm really pleased to have Jane on to share her experience. So welcome, Jane.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon, even it is now.
It is. So, Jane, maybe for people who don't know you, maybe a bit of background in terms of how you've got to where you've got to will be really good.
Sure. As Tim says, I am passionate about groups, and you're getting me just as I finished a group course this morning. So I'm full of inspiration for the people who've been part of that course. So I come to it really, and thinking about this earlier, I come to it because I was a teacher, and teaching, we just expect groups, don't we? We expect groups of 30 kids learning whatever they're learning. So I do come back from a background of group work and working with people in numbers, and went from that, from teaching into personal training, and which is one to one. But I immediately brought sort of group work to that program because it was effective, it's helpful, and many of the things that I find it brings to coaching. And then I came into coaching, and my role was a lot of one-to-one work, but I was very keen to bring group work. I'd seen particularly the work that people have done in the low carb world with groups of patients coming together to learn maybe a different way of thinking alongside ideas around how to manage their diabetes through diet and lifestyle. And through that, I was inspired to get groups going, and we now run groups that are based around metabolic health, but we also run groups just as a space to do coaching in, and groups to support patients with weight loss. And our group sizes vary from just a few patients, sometimes for non-diabetic hyperglycemia consultations, through to had 150 people in a group yesterday online, which is a whole nother ball game and experience. But I do really enjoy it, and think it could be the future of health coaching in the NHS, because we have a lot of people, don't we, and not a lot of health coaches.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. So 150 people all the way down to a few people. There's so much scope, isn't there, for groups? And I suppose what I'm really interested to know from your perspective, so why groups? Because obviously you do see people one to one as well, but why groups for you, Jane? What's important about them?
Yeah, I've given this some thought. I mean, I really, ultimately, it's probably the job satisfaction. It gives me the lift week in, week out, when things, the NHS isn't always easy. There's a lot of stuff going on, but when you're in there and you're working with a group of people and it works well, it gives you job satisfaction like no other part of my work. And I see things happen for people that I don't always see. So I don't. Sometimes people sort of say, "Oh, this patient won't want group work," and I hear it from coaches as well, that sort of group work is seen largely to be about numbers and getting through the waiting list and so on. When I think it's about so much more than that. And personally, for me, it is incredibly satisfying part of the work I do. Um, but it also does help with numbers, and it helps with waiting lists and so on. But that's a bit of a byproduct. And I like one-to-one stuff, but it's not the same. So for me, I would probably rather be running groups and managing all the stuff around that, which is a lot, a huge amount, and takes a big dent into everything else you're doing. So accounting for that. But yeah, that's probably why groups, they're more effective, I think, for many
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of touch on that people kind of think about groups about, oh, well, let's just get through the waiting list. So it's a kind of very efficient, isn't it? We see more people,
Yeah.
and that's efficient. But what I'm hearing from you is also really effective. It's not just about getting through the numbers, it's also really effective.
Yeah, I should have recorded some of the comments from the people who've been in the group. I often get comments like, I really didn't want to come to this, but now I'm really sad it's finishing, or how can I carry on, and how do we keep this going, and so on. That I think is very inspiring, to say groups, when they're done well, work, and they're challenging to do well. There's a lot of things to think about, and there may be the things we don't always think of. So we see groups where things don't always work well, and we have people talk about, one of the questions we get often, Tim, is in the course we run is, how do you manage that dominant person, or how do I get adherence? We started with 12 people and only 3 people came. So I think thinking on those things and so on can be really important in it. And that, I think people feel daunted to start groups because that's the experience. Is It's really hard to get people to come along and hard to get people to commit and hard to make sure that certain characters don't disrupt the group. So there's a lot of challenges in it, but when you crack some of those things, and it doesn't always go right, some of them are the most exhausting sessions of work I've done as well, to be fair. But when you crack it, it's hugely rewarding.
Yeah. I think I heard you say something about that, that penny drop moment. If you have a penny drop moment, do you say that? You remind me
Yeah.
what you said, because it really stuck
Well,
with me.
yeah, I think it was something about when I said it to you before, it was like, when you're one to one and someone has that light bulb or penny drop moment, it's wonderful for you as a coach because you've helped them get their thinking there. It's great for the patient because they've got there. But it's only the two of you can have this. And when that happens in a group environment, the other 11 people in your room of 12 or your video call, or yesterday it actually happened with 150 people in the room. And it was this, I think, is a really great example of group work and why it's so good. A patient had asked a question of the GP who was also on the call, a bit of a technical medical question about some side effects they were having. And the answer for the patient was, well, we really need to focus on hydration and drink more. And sort of as a health coach, I'm like, yeah, it's really, really important that you're drinking enough. And we're telling someone what they know, aren't we? We're telling that everyone knows we need to all drink more and so on. And particularly these was a group of patients who are on weight loss medications, and this patient was suffering with constipation. And so the doctor sort of told them the technical things and the names of things they can ask for over the counter. And I talked about a few things. And then we had a patient join in the conversation who's been on the medication for a year and was able to say, I had exactly the same. I really struggled with it. And the key was hydration. And I found that I had to drink more, like 3 liters of water a day, to really have a difference. And I had to go out and buy one of those bottles that had timings on it telling me when to drink. And the impact for not just the patient who asked the question, because I bet they're not alone in that room in having that problem, but not everybody wants to talk about poo in front of 150 other people. Um, but so it touched them. But I think also hearing it from the patient, I bet you that person's gone out and bought that bottle and drunk more today, when they're so used to hearing it from their health care professionals or from their health coach who's like, drink more water. And I think it sort of leads on to one of these things. We think groups are about us imparting the knowledge for them to go away with. And I think if one thing I've learned, it's really so much less about that than the environment for them to think about the things they maybe already know, or the things they're learning, or the things they're picking up. And that's where those light bulb moments happen. And when they get this light bulb moment or a question answered in front of everyone else, they benefit. It really reflects, especially if they've done some really brilliant thinking, it's really nice for them to feel how that's helped other people. But also those other people do benefit. And I'm sure probably it won't just be the person affected who asked the question who maybe went out and either bought a bottle or focused on drinking more today and so on, but it will have been several other people in the room. So I think that's a huge benefit I see from group coaching.
Yeah, so that's that kind of peer support element, isn't it? It's so much more powerful, isn't it? People hearing other people's experience, who are people like them,
Yeah,
rather than it is from either the coaches or the healthcare professionals telling people stuff. It's so much more powerful, isn't it? Which is,
I think,
different
yeah,
what you get from a group.
it's more believable somehow, because they really identify that that person uh, has been where they're at and has found a solution that may also help them.
Yeah.
And seeing that happen, and that happens not just with those, sort of examples of knowledge sharing, but with thinking as well. You can see when other people's confidence in a group grows, you can watch other people's confidence. So the group I had this morning, we've absolutely witnesses. We had some people who in the group who were more confident and knew more and really ready to get started changing their diet. and we're getting great results. And sort of 4 or 5 weeks in, one of the quieter guys said, I've been feeling a bit daunted and like I'm really an imposter and I'm not really doing this stuff, but actually I keep coming back each week because I am finding you really inspiring. And the next week he said, do you know what's happened? I've grown up. I've suddenly realized I've got to do this stuff too. And then on
Mm.
this last week, another 2 months on, he's lost 10 kilos. He's cooking for himself. He's realizing he can do it. And I don't actually believe that comes from the knowledge that I shared that was part of this. We do base it on a bit of a program, but it's been so much more that sharing of experience and the building of confidence over the weeks. And they said this was really important today. Actually, the group were reflecting. I've run this last course on a longer program of 3 months rather than the 6 weeks that just about fits in all the kind of information. And I decided to do it over a longer period of time. And that's been really, really valuable because we've had so much more time for thinking as opposed to knowledge. And that's been the really valuable part because you've watched people's thinking grow and change and so on. So, yeah.
I think sometimes the thing that stops us kind of setting up groups is that we feel we don't know enough, or that we need to download everything that we know
Mm,
to people, and it becomes almost like an information kind of download session.
mm, mm,
And the other bit, the most important bit that I think I'm hearing from you, is the space for people to think about it from their own perspective and also
mm.
share their own experience, which sometimes gets squeezed out. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to hear that journey that you've been on in that. And I know when we do run the course together, the working with groups course, people often, one of the takeaways is, I need to just dial back a whole load of information that I
Mm.
was going to share with people. I'm just going to stop doing that and just provide more space.
I don't know if you can see that, but that's my plan from this morning. It's got 5 points on it of what we were going to do.
Yeah.
Because I just need to know a structure. I think people like to feel that they're being held in a structure, and that we're going to move on and we're going to get round things and that there is some time constraint. So, that comes down to all the contracting, doesn't it? This is what we're going to do today. And they know that things will move on, which helps actually with the biggest concern that I hear from people is this idea of the dominant person. And actually, probably the hardest thing you have to do when working with groups is be a bit of a bossy teacher person. They need you to do that. They need you to hold the space, share it equally, get that sense of equality, and time and turn that we talk about in coaching. And that's probably the most challenging thing because the more you can do it, the more people will appreciate it. But it feels really hard and doesn't. I think my teaching background helps with that. I've had to organise 30, 16-year-old girls to do hockey on a wet, windy afternoon. So 12 adults on a Zoom call is not so challenging, but it really does take that. And it takes that sort of, okay, I'm going to have to cut in here and try to appreciate the person who's talking and what they've brought to it, to not cut them off and to value their contribution while allowing it to move on. And mastering that, I think, is a big challenge in group work. I absolutely haven't mastered it, but I'm working on it. And
Yeah.
sometimes it goes really well, and you watch that person over time realize that sometimes they need to step back and they do it themselves. And other times, maybe someone leaves because they didn't actually like being told that it was someone else's turn, and you won't always get it right.
Yeah. But it's okay, isn't it? I
But it's
mean, you might get
okay
it all right.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
it is okay, and people will appreciate that. And your group isn't always going to be right for everyone. Even if you do everything right, it's not going to be right for everyone. Some people will sometimes drop out. Some people will find that other things in life are more important on a Tuesday afternoon, even though they said they'd definitely turn up to your sessions and so on. And we know that, don't we? We know it from one to one. But I would say my rates of no shows and not turning up is way less for groups than it is for one to one, which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that feels really like that time is then being well spent, because okay, if one or two people don't come, you've still got a group of other people who will be there. Whereas actually, if someone doesn't turn up for a one-to-one, you've
Yeah,
you've got
totally. And I
yeah, you're admin to catch up on, but you haven't got that opportunity to kind of work with someone.
Totally. And I think that really adds to the job satisfaction, because I can come out of a back-to-back book day of one-to-ones with, one no-show, one cancellation, and one person who you call them and they went, oh yeah, I forgot, but I can talk on the phone now. And you don't feel very valued. You work in a group and 10 out of your 12 people turn up. You walk out of there really feeling like stuff has happened. And I think from the job satisfaction point of view, that's really helpful. And also, I think the thing about groups, because it is more structured, they know the session is happening. They either need to be in it or not in it. They can't just phone up and say, "Oh, can we? Oh, really sorry, things are caught up on me. I'm busy today. Can I do it next week?" They almost know they're missing out by not coming. And I think when I'm thinking about how am I going to get people to adhere, there's part of that really building the value of what you're going to get by coming along here, and making it valuable. When they turn up, make it a good, interesting, pleasant place to be, and also making them sense that they're quite lucky, fortunate to have been offered this time and space,
Yeah.
and to think about their health and put themselves first, which people find so hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you in a moment to kind of outline, because you said about kind of running a session well, and I really want to I'll probably put you on the spot, but like, what does that, how do you do that, and what does that look like? So maybe just hold that. But I suppose
Yep.
one of the we talk about, don't we, on our program, about kind of the three C's, and then you've added another C. So that is about that importance of connecting as a group, because again, people are going to feel more, maybe they're more likely to come when they've connected with the other people in the group, because they kind of
Hmm.
feel like there's an accountability there. So
Hmm.
connection really important. Contracting, which you've mentioned, about maybe the more kind of the dominant person and how we manage that as a group, what the group's going to be about and how long it's going to run for and all that kind of stuff. The contracting really important, and then the kind of the coaching element. But then you also mentioned the fourth C. So tell us about
Yeah,
that, Jane.
I mean, community is hugely important to me. I really, I think discharge is a bit of a revolting word, and it's a shame that we use it so much in these types of program. And I was really thinking about this. So many programs are, we pay a fortune, don't we, to outside agencies to do 12 weeks. You can have 12 weeks of Slimming World, or you can have 12 weeks of More Life Tier 3 uh, dietary support, or you can have 12 weeks at the gym. And as a personal trainer, I absolutely know I can make massive differences to someone in 12 weeks. But where they are a year later is dependent on many, many other things. So I do feel these companies can have great stats for their weight loss in 12 weeks, because you do, if you make changes and you get people to commit. So community is really important to me. We were talking today about what happens next, and what's really important to me when we come to the end of one of these courses is that people leave knowing what they're going to do next, where they can go, where the support is, and what will happen. And so I try to build community. It doesn't always work. I know I've got a Facebook page for patients, but it's really hard to get that active. We run a WhatsApp group alongside any of the groups we do, and that's pretty important for community. And I think people find that really helpful, and they're all asking if they can carry on with their WhatsApp group and so on. I really encourage peer support afterwards. So sort of saying, you're free at this time on Thursdays. You've committed for the last 12 weeks. There's nothing stopping you guys finding a cafe, meeting up. You know, I would love it. I believe it should be so much more successful. It's not hugely successful, but we do have some peer networking going on. We have some groups meeting on a Tuesday afternoon when they used to come to an in-person group and so on. But keeping that motivation, I think, is quite hard. Um, my GP brother-in-law in Australia said to me once that the success of all weight loss groups is down to the enthusiasm of the administrator. And I sort of disputed this a little bit, but I do get that sense, and it's very hard to know how to untwine your own enthusiasm. I'm very enthusiastic. I love my groups. I put a lot in, and I do sense that sometimes they want you to continue holding it together. And I haven't cracked that yet, but I still believe that GP practices should be at the heart of our communities. And I don't quite know why they're not and what's stopping that. I mean, I saw something at Healy when I came up that was amazing, that was patients manning a sort of tea, coffee place where people could come in and chat. And some practices are really getting it and providing that community opportunity. Other practices are super resistant, and this idea that patients might step over the threshold in any other way than they're meant to is harder. But I think if we could build community, Freshwell, who have the app for a great website for low carb for diabetes remission, have an amazing Facebook community, which is largely facilitated by a couple of expert patients. They're very fortunate to have them. They have two GPs who've written an incredible program. They have a health coach, but she doesn't have to get super involved in the Facebook group, and it's really got a life of its own, and it's now kind of got huge numbers of people nationwide. And I aspire to have something like that for our patients, but it's interesting. That's probably huge because actually it has got patients from all over the country. I would like to do something that was smaller, but it's hard to know quite how that happens.
Mm,
Yeah.
great. Oh, it's
A
fascinating.
work in progress
Yeah,
community,
and
I think.
you can sense your energy for it, Jane, which is really encouraging. And I suppose for maybe on along that line, we want to encourage people to run groups. You said you think it's maybe the future of health coaching as well. So again, for those who want to maybe start running a group or um run it well, as you said, what's some pointers that you might
Mm.
give them?
So I think it's really deciding, what's the purpose of the group? Why would you want to set it up? What do you want to get out of it? So my most recent group, the purpose was to take recently diagnosed diabetes patients and introduce them to the idea that it can be put into remission with diet and lifestyle. So I decide on that's what I want to do with this group, and then I've got to find the patients. And knowing that you've got to find a huge number of patients to fill just I try to run an online group and a in-person group simultaneously, so people get offered two options. But I think I invited over 400 patients from who fitted that criteria from three practices, and ended up slightly overbooked in person, which was 13 people, and 10 people on my online course, of which I think I've ended with 11 in the room at the last session in person, and 7 online. And so it's sort of knowing that how many people you've got to invite to get the interest. You can't just put up a couple of posters and hope that people will sign up and come along. I think that's maybe where we go wrong. You've got to use, if you're working in a practice and they're supportive of it, you've got to use those patient searches, go in, invite lots of people. And if you're oversubscribed, know that, well, then you'll run another one and you'll have waiting lists, and that you've then got a list of the people who are interested in the type of thing you're offering. So worrying about being overwhelmed, I think, is probably something that holds people back, because they're a little bit quiet in case they get too many people, but better too many people. And online, you can run bigger groups, or you could put more on, can't you? You do it more times a week. I did run 4 simultaneous online groups at one stage, which was actually easier than it sounds, because you're doing the same thing for the same group 4
Yeah,
times a week. The same follow-up email, the same interactions, and so on. So it is possible to do that if you get an overwhelming response.
great.
So that would be one thing. And then I think, we always like to talk about Nancy Klein, don't we? And I really like to use her principles to help you work out what's going to work well. And I think if you start out with the idea that you've got to use ease as the basis. It's got to be easy for people to come to, easy for them to access, easy for them to understand, easeful when they're in the room or they're in the meeting. And if you use that principle of how easy is this going to be and how easeful, for every interaction that a patient has with what's happening in the group, you'll have a more successful group, because it
Great.
covers so much, that idea of, is someone finding this easy to do?
Yeah, great. So go big in terms of inviting lots of people, create an easeful environment, make it easy for people to join, all of those things. What else would be useful, do you think?
Um, be super welcoming. So cut the NHS speak, be a bit fluffy, make your emails really friendly. Um, sort of, really draw people in to how this is going to be, and that it's going to be interesting and fun and exciting. Um, Draw on their commit once they're in, draw on their commitment. So tell them there's a waiting list. Once they're signed up, let them know. So there's quite a lot of pre-course touching base with them, with not too big full emails, but maybe actually quite regular. And unfortunately, I know people aren't that happy about doing this, but I use my own NHS email to directly communicate with patients, because I think, different from clinicians, I have far less interactions with less patients, and they're not going to bring their complaints and issues to me. I've never yet had an issue with patients having my email address. But what it means is that when they want to reply, they're just replying straight to me. I see it and so on. So I send out group emails, BCC'd, and they come directly from me once we start talking like that, so I can answer questions. And you have to put that front end work in, probably, to really answer people's questions, put them at ease, make things clear, and then easeful in the room. Your first session has got to be really well thought out, that you're not just going to dive in and go, right, here's a slideshow of how we're going to reverse diabetes, because that's not actually the most important thing. They will not put their diabetes into remission if they are uncomfortable in the room, or in the space. So that connection, and really thinking, how are we going to connect at first, before you then contract about how we'll be in this room. Contracting is all about ease as well, isn't it? We contract to make things easier, actually, and doing that in a gentle and compassionate way that says, hey, you're lucky to have a space in this room, so I want you to turn up, but we're all going to be, really kind and turn up on time. So, I have the door open 15 minutes before the session starts, so that they can come and they can settle in the room. But at 3:30, when the session starts, I shut the door, which does mean that if patients are late, they have to knock on the door, which sounds a bit brutal. But what it means over time is they're generally coming. And when someone does knock on the door because they're late, then we stop and we make it really easy, easy to come in. We don't. I'm not there going, oh, you're terrible. But it seems to work, and so it's that clear is kind, isn't it? You're setting those boundaries, and people feel, I think, very safe because of that. So they do turn up early, and they are doing what's asked of them, because it's just very clear. Hope most of the time, not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes your internet connection drops out and it's all chaos, and you have to ask other people to hold the room while you leave the meeting and come back in, and so on. It does happen.
And it's okay. I mean, it does
Yeah,
happen,
and
but
it's
it's okay,
okay.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, there's so much we could talk about, Jane, and I'm sure there's more you could talk about. But I'm just wondering, in terms of, because of for time,
yeah.
um, yeah, I suppose any resources, anything that you found particularly helpful in terms of setting up the groups and them working well, anything that you've used, either resources or things you've come up with yourself that you think work
So
well.
it's not a resource, but I am thinking of something that's really important. I work across 3 practices. You've got to be really kind to the people who might be dealing with patients turning up at your venue. So a resource is to build relationships with the reception staff, who could be getting patients who from a different practice coming in, and so on. So thinking about some of that. In terms of actual resources, we've got a few on the website, I think, haven't we, from the course that we run, that may be useful. I don't know if they're open access or if they're accessible from the course. We did that 10 challenges that you might face.
Yeah, that's
Um,
well, at the moment, that is just for people who come on the
okay,
program. I mean, we have got a program coming up in September, and we are offering that as kind of, I don't think it shouldn't be kind of an advertising thing. We're not advertising, but we have got the opportunity for people to bring a colleague for free. Because I
okay.
suppose that was the other thing is, I mean, you running groups by yourself? Are you all running all the groups by yourself, Jane, or do you have other people that join you?
I wish I had other people. I mean, I think that's probably one of my hardest and biggest challenges, is maintaining the enthusiasm when, I don't seem to have infected everyone else with it. And I do run the groups on my own, and it's super challenging. And I would really recommend that if you work in a team of health coaches, or with colleagues who are keen to run groups with you, you draw them in. I feel very fortunate that I've been allowed to go ahead and kind of build this thing, but I don't have a team of health coaches, and I do run it myself, and I do nearly all my own admin because it's really hard across 3 practices to have admin support that understands and knows what you're trying to do. Fortunately, my manager is understanding of that, and gives me the time to come in and do that as well.
Yeah. Great. So again, just to close, Jane. So someone, let's say someone is thinking about running a group. They're slightly daunted, as you said at the beginning of the session, in terms of how that'd be. What would your you wouldn't give advice, of course, because you're a coach, but what would be your encouragement be to them, Jane?
A lovely phrase I learned when I was having some coaching around running a fitness business was version 1 is better than version none. I find that really helpful.
Mm.
Get your idea down on paper, decide who what your plan is, what you want to achieve. Find out who are the people you're going to ask, and ask them to come along. And remember, actually, if you run a group and it's 4 people, that's okay as well. And it may be at first. And then you've got to start thinking, well, why only 4 people interested in this great group I ran? But maybe a smaller group at first could be an easier thing to do. And the very first group I did was online. I think I had 6 patients who were keen because I only invited from 1 surgery. And so doing it, giving it a go. Because the worst that happens is you have one person turn up and then you've done one-to-one health coaching like you're doing all the time anyway. So yeah, version 1 will be okay. It will be good enough. And you don't need much content. You don't need to make incredible PowerPoints and huge preparation and so on. You need to be present in the room and be that coach who is whatever the saying is, both invaluable but
Irrelevant.
unimportant, something like that. You'll know the quote. That what is the quote? The
Yeah,
coach should be.
you're both essential. You're both essential and irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think holding on to that a little bit, that actually if you can gather people and you can hold them and you can give them a sense of ease of being together to talk about. So if you start with people with a similar condition and you just think about that coaching process of helping people think well about their health circumstance, you'll get conversations going.
Mm.
And I suppose I would then go on to say, use multiple different ways of getting that going. Don't feel like a group is just people sat in a circle and all talking together. Take control again and say, right, what we're going to do is you're going to turn to the person here and answer this question between you. You're going to turn to the people the other side and tell us one thing about so and so, like we might do when we're starting our training courses and so on. Today I started my meeting by everybody coming in and just saying one thing that they were looking forward to in the next 3 months, which will be 3 months when they're not coming to a regular meeting. One thing they were looking forward to about following a new way of eating. And that gives them a chance to all land in the metaphorical room, speak, take it in turns, listen to each other. Online, I've had less success because Teams is a brute when people are not in your organization. So I'm not able to use breakout rooms in the way I would. But when we're in person, we use a lot of breaking out into sort of pairs to discuss something, pairs, so that the whole room doesn't always need to listen. Then we'll bring in a few people who go, I heard someone say this, and we can bring it back to the room.
Mm.
Yeah.
Great. Oh my goodness, there's so much we could talk about. And I think maybe we need a series, Jane. We need a few follow-up ones, a kind of how do you run online groups? How do you run in-person groups? How do you run maybe different types of group, whether that's kind of a
Yeah.
lifestyle
Yeah.
group or one of the metabolic health ones or the pain ones. There's a whole lot of stuff we can
Yeah.
bring
Yeah.
in, isn't there?
Ideas
Um,
for,
yeah.
because there's
No,
no how to, is there? I mean, I think that's the thing, is my groups are so varied and there isn't really a how to, because they could be, this massive one of 150 people. That's really interesting to see what people are getting from it, through to much smaller groups that are group consultations. So I have run one with the pharmacist actually for the non-diabetic hypoglycemia. So I do have some. Sometimes I have a friend.
delightful to spend time with you, Jane. I'm sure we're going to have you back to kind of talk about more about groups because I'm inclined to agree with you that I think groups are the way forward. not just because of efficiency, but because I think they are really effective and they are a really good way of bringing people together
Mm,
to then help build community. So
sure.
I'm absolutely behind you on that.
And I mean, I think I would just finish by saying one-to-one is still a really important part of what I do, and I will do one-to-one with many of the people who've come to groups. But imagine starting one-to-one with somebody who has come through a group program and then wants to look into their own very personal thinking one-to-one. They're almost more ready for coaching at that point. And I think we tend to see it the other way round. If they did some one-to-one, they might be ready for a group. Um,
Mm.
Whereas actually this way round, we can follow up. Maybe there's blood tests and so on, often, especially with diabetes. And we can say, well, let's get your blood tests and then let's talk really about what you bring from this course and the results you've seen so far. And that can be really effective one-to-one. I mean that you don't need a series of 6 one-to-one sessions. You need 1 or 2.
Nice one.
Cool.
So yeah, it's not one or the other, and having a blend of the two could be really powerful.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to kind of have another conversation, Jane. I'll let you go now,
No problem.
and thanks so much for your time today.
Not at all. Thanks, Tim.